Let's be honest. There's a part of every man that wants to understand a woman beyond the surface. Not because you're judgmental, but because understanding her mind, her history, and her patterns gives you clarity most men never get. And today, I'm going to reveal truths women rarely admit, signs hidden in plain sight that hint at a life a woman has lived intimately. This isn't about shaming anyone, it's about knowledge, insight, and self-protection. Because the moment you know these truths, you stop guessing, stop overthinking, and start seeing reality for what it is. One of the first things you notice, if you pay attention, is how a woman talks about intimacy. Women who have experienced a variety of partners often approach conversations about sex with a casual tone, almost as if it's a chapter in a story rather than the climax. Listen to her words. Does she joke about past experiences in a way that seems rehearsed, like a performance rather than a memory? That subtle detachment, that lightness around deeply personal topics, often indicates a history she's been comfortable navigating. It's not a flaw, it's a pattern you can recognize if you pay attention. Another signal is how she approaches emotional vulnerability. A woman who has been with many men may guard her heart fiercely. You might notice that she's open about her opinions, her ambitions, even her fears. But when it comes to love, there's a layer that's almost impenetrable. She might talk about commitment, but there's a cautious undertone, a hesitancy that tells you she's learned lessons the hard way. It's subtle, but men who understand female psychology pick up on it. That hesitation isn't about you personally. It's about experience shaping boundaries, a protective shield built over time. Then there's confidence, real, unapologetic confidence, not arrogance, but a natural, effortless ease in how she carries herself in social settings, in her choices, and in intimacy. Women who have explored their sexuality often exude a magnetic energy. It's in the way they laugh, the way they maintain eye contact, the way they flirt without fear or hesitation. And yes, men are drawn to it instantly. This is a psychological pattern rooted in freedom and self-awareness. She knows herself in ways many haven't had the courage to explore, and that knowledge manifests in her energy. Pay attention to boundaries. A woman with past experiences often sets clear lines without apology. She doesn't over-explain, and she doesn't need validation. This isn't coldness, it's wisdom. She has learned where she gives, where she holds back, and where she refuses to be compromised. Men who mistake this for rejection often fail to see it as a strength. But in reality, it's a sign of someone who has navigated complexity and come out with a clear sense of self. And here's something subtle. The stories she shares about intimacy aren't always about passion. They're about curiosity, exploration, and lessons learned. When she talks about past partners, notice the focus. Does she emphasize emotional connection, or does she focus on experiences, lessons, and personal growth? The answer can reveal a lot about her history and how she approaches relationships today. Finally, observe how she reacts to possessiveness. Women who have explored their sexuality extensively often respond differently to control or jealousy. It's not defiance, it's self-respect. She knows her worth, and she recognizes when a man's insecurity is projecting onto her. That awareness is subtle, but it's a telltale psychological marker of her journey. Here's a question to make you reflect. How much of what you've interpreted as mystery is actually experience-shaping behavior? Think about it, because the answer changes the way you approach intimacy forever. Appearances can be deceiving. A woman who has experienced multiple partners doesn't broadcast it. She doesn't wear it like a badge, but her energy, her choices, and even her habits leave subtle clues if you know how to read them. And this is where most men fail. They see a beautiful woman and assume she's fresh or innocent, but female psychology works in layers. Every choice, every reaction, every glance carries echoes of her past. Start with intimacy style. Women with experience often express themselves confidently, yet they also expect a level of attentiveness and connection that untrained men overlook. They respond to subtle cues, tone of voice, body language, emotional intelligence. A man who's oblivious may think she's hard to please, but the truth is she knows what she likes and isn't afraid to communicate it, directly or indirectly. That confidence comes from practice, from knowing her own desires and boundaries, and it's one of the most revealing indicators of her past. Watch how she navigates attention from others. A woman who has been with many men understands the power of choice. She knows how to make someone feel desired without giving away too much. Notice how she handles compliments, flirtation, or unwanted advances. She doesn't overreact. She doesn't over-explain. But there's a poise in her reaction. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but men who learn to observe recognize it immediately. That poise? It's a byproduct of experience, of learning how to protect her space while navigating desire. Another sign is her approach to exclusivity. Women who've explored their sexuality deeply often challenge the traditional narrative of relationships, not out of rebellion, but out of understanding. She values emotional intimacy, respect, and mental connection over societal expectations. She knows what commitment means and doesn't confuse it with temporary affection. If she hesitates to rush into serious labels, it's not manipulation, it's discernment. She's learned the cost of confusion and chooses clarity instead. Pay attention to stories of her past. Women rarely share intimate details lightly. When she does, notice the framing. Does she focus on lessons, personal growth, or patterns she's recognized? Or does she linger in judgment or shame? The way she frames her experiences can reveal her comfort level with her own sexuality. Women comfortable with their history carry it without defensiveness. Their past becomes a source of wisdom, not regret. Then there's the way she reacts under pressure or criticism. Women with a rich sexual past have often encountered judgment, unwanted advice, or societal assumptions. They develop resilience, an inner armor that shields them from unnecessary stress. You might notice she doesn't seek validation from everyone, she doesn't over-explain herself, and she has an uncanny ability to redirect conversations back to what matters: her comfort, her choice, her autonomy. This strength, invisible to many, is one of the clearest signs of experience. Finally, notice subtle self-care patterns. Women who have been with many partners often develop habits of knowing themselves physically and emotionally. From grooming to body language to emotional cues, she invests in her self-awareness. It's not vanity, it's mastery over her own presence. Men attuned to this can sense it instantly. Now ask yourself, are you seeing her actions, or are you projecting your assumptions onto her? The difference will determine whether you understand her or fall for illusions that leave you confused and frustrated. The signs aren't always obvious. You can't rely on rumors, gossip, or what a woman says about her past. The truth is written in behavior, in energy, in subtle patterns that most men completely miss. Understanding these signs isn't about judgment. It's about insight. It's about seeing beyond the surface and knowing what drives her choices, her confidence, and her connection with you. One of the clearest markers is how she handles intimacy after a conflict. Women with varied experiences rarely respond with passive aggression or games. They react based on awareness. If she's upset, she communicates, she sets boundaries, and she knows when to step back without overreacting. She has learned that emotional control and self-respect preserve dignity. Watch carefully. The way she navigates tension in relationships reveals far more than words ever will. Next, pay attention to how she discusses her body. Women who've explored their sexuality deeply often have a relationship with their own body that is unapologetic and self-aware. She doesn't seek approval for her appearance. She knows her worth isn't measured by compliments. But she also uses her awareness subtly through posture, movement, and confidence to express herself. A man who can read these nonverbal cues understands far more about her history than any story she tells. Observe how she manages desire. A woman with a history of multiple partners has learned that desire is powerful but fleeting if mishandled. She doesn't give it away carelessly, but she knows when to engage, when to withhold, and when to redirect energy. That control is magnetic and often intimidating to men who aren't used to it. It's not manipulation, it's a natural outcome of experience, self-respect, and knowing what she wants in both intimacy and life. Look at how she interacts with other men. Confidence tempered with caution is a hallmark of experience. She can be friendly, she can flirt, but there's an invisible line. Men who cross it are quickly redirected, often without confrontation. Women like this have learned to protect their emotional and physical space, and their energy naturally communicates boundaries. If a man misreads this as arrogance or disinterest, he's missing the nuance entirely. Then there's her perspective on relationships. Women who've been with many partners often approach love with intelligence and strategy, not cynicism. They recognize patterns, they notice red flags, and they evaluate compatibility quickly. That awareness often translates into subtle testing, little questions, tiny observations, and responses designed to gauge authenticity. For the untrained man, it feels like mystery. For the observant, it's a roadmap. Notice also how she handles intimacy discussions. Women with experience often prefer honesty, directness, and mutual understanding. They rarely tolerate manipulation or dishonesty because they've seen the consequences. If she challenges you to think, to express your intentions clearly, to show emotional depth, it's not criticism, it's instinct honed by experience. Finally, watch for authenticity in her laughter, her teasing, her flirtation. Women who've explored intimacy aren't afraid of playfulness, but it's grounded in self-awareness. There's no overcompensation, no need to impress. That ease, that comfort, is magnetic, and it's a direct reflection of experiences that shaped her confidence. Here's a question for you to reflect on. Are you interpreting her confidence as challenge, or are you recognizing it as experience? Your answer reveals how prepared you are to truly connect or to get lost in illusions. There's a reason most men miss the signs entirely. It's because they're looking for drama, gossip, or loud confessions instead of observing the subtle truths women reveal through behavior, energy, and choices. Women who have been with multiple men rarely broadcast it, but the traces are there if you pay attention, and knowing them can save you confusion, heartbreak, and wasted energy. Start with her relationship with emotional intimacy. A woman with experience often values depth over quantity. She doesn't fall easily, but when she does, it's intentional. She assesses emotional compatibility quickly and won't tolerate superficial connections for long. That discernment comes from knowing what works, what doesn't, and what she's unwilling to compromise. For a man who can recognize it, this is less about warning signs and more about clarity. She isn't hard to reach. She's selective, and her standards have been shaped by experience. Another signal is how she approaches sexual humor or innuendo. Women who've explored their sexuality often use wit and playfulness to navigate conversations about intimacy. They can make light of situations without shame, and they gauge your reaction carefully. If she flirts verbally but maintains boundaries, it's a subtle marker of experience. She knows what she wants, and she knows how to communicate it without giving away too much control. That balance between playfulness and restraint is incredibly telling. Pay attention to the way she handles curiosity. Women who've been with multiple partners often ask questions, not to test you, but to understand you on a deeper level. They're observant, intentional, and rarely satisfied with surface-level answers. That curiosity is rooted in lessons learned, and it's a way of filtering out men who aren't aligned with her values, desires, or emotional intelligence. If you dismiss it as interrogation, you're missing the subtle dance of insight and experience. Then there's her approach to trust. Women with past intimacy have seen the consequences of misplaced trust, so they measure it carefully. She may seem cautious or even skeptical at first, But that skepticism isn't rejection, it's protection. Men who mistake caution for disinterest often fail to see the wisdom behind it. Her trust is earned, not given, and the way she tests it quietly is one of the clearest indicators of her history. Look at her handling of social situations and male attention. She rarely overreacts, she rarely needs validation, and she rarely plays into jealousy. That doesn't mean she isn't aware, quite the opposite. She has learned how to navigate male attention gracefully, how to keep control of her image, and how to protect her autonomy. That subtle confidence is magnetic, and most men notice it subconsciously, even if they can't articulate why. Notice her approach to past stories or mistakes. Women comfortable with their history frame experiences as learning, not regret. If she discusses previous partners with a sense of growth, reflection, or humor, it's a sign of self-awareness. She doesn't need to defend her past because she has made peace with it. That ease is a psychological marker of experience, one that many men mistake for mystery or emotional distance. Here's a reflection for you. Are you observing her patterns, or are you projecting your insecurities onto them? Your answer determines whether you truly understand her or remain lost in assumptions. Some of the most revealing signs aren't in what she says, but in what she doesn't say. Silence, hesitation, even the way she moves. These are all clues most men ignore. Women who have been with many men carry subtle markers of experience in behavior, energy, and emotional awareness. Understanding these markers isn't about judgment. It's about insight, clarity, and protecting your own emotional investment. Notice her reactions to intimacy that feels routine. Women with experience don't fall for shallow gestures or generic words. They notice effort, attentiveness, and emotional presence. A simple compliment or a casual touch doesn't excite them unless it carries authenticity. That discernment comes from having seen patterns of behavior before. If you're attentive, you'll realize quickly that a woman like this can sense pretense, insecurity, or lack of depth instantly. Pay attention to how she sets boundaries in real time. Experienced women rarely apologize for saying no or redirecting energy to what they actually want. If she tells you clearly what works and what doesn't, it's not arrogance, it's clarity shaped by lessons learned. Men who mistake this for disinterest fail to see that her boundaries are a sign of self-respect, emotional intelligence, and awareness of past consequences. Another revealing marker is how she handles vulnerability. Women who have explored intimacy extensively are rarely naive about men's intentions. They may share moments of tenderness selectively, testing authenticity without ever needing to verbalize it. Watch for subtle cues, eye contact, micro-expressions, and tone shifts. These are windows into her trust and comfort levels, learned over years of navigating intimacy with care and strategy. Observe how she talks about past relationships. Women with a history of multiple partners rarely focus on drama or complaints. They frame experiences as insights, lessons, and growth. They may reference past partners casually, but always in a way that emphasizes their own evolution. If she conveys humor, reflection, or awareness, it's a sign she has learned from every connection and carries herself with emotional sophistication that many men miss. Then there's her approach to desire and flirtation. Experienced women understand the balance between allure and control. They don't overexpose themselves, but they know how to attract, hold attention, and communicate boundaries without words. That tension, the magnetic pull combined with self-possession, is a signature of experience. Men who don't recognize it may misinterpret confidence as arrogance, but the reality is far more nuanced. It's awareness, maturity, and self-respect. Finally, pay attention to the energy she radiates when she's alone versus when she's with you. Experienced women often carry a quiet strength, a self-contained presence that doesn't require validation. She doesn't need to impress anyone, yet she draws attention naturally. This balance of independence and connection is one of the clearest psychological markers of someone who has navigated intimacy repeatedly and emerged self-assured. Here's a personal question to reflect on. Are you drawn to her confidence or intimidated by the truth her presence reveals? Think carefully, because how you answer this determines whether you can handle a woman with experience or remain stuck in frustration and confusion. Understanding a woman's past isn't about judgment, it's about clarity, awareness, and respect. A man who sees the subtle signs, reads her energy, and observes her patterns is far ahead of the average man. Because the truth is, women carry their history in ways most men never notice, in confidence, in boundaries, in curiosity, in playfulness, and in the quiet way they protect themselves. Recognizing this is not just insight, it's a form of self-protection, emotional intelligence, and personal growth. Watch how she expresses herself in moments of intimacy. Women with experience don't need validation. They want connection, authenticity, and presence. If she challenges you to show depth, emotion, or attentiveness, it's not manipulation. It's a reflection of lessons learned. She knows her worth, her desires, and her limits. A man who understands this is not intimidated. He respects it, engages with it, and grows alongside it. Pay attention to emotional cues. Experienced women often test subtly, not to trap, but to evaluate sincerity. A raised eyebrow, a lingering glance, or a quiet pause isn't casual, it's observation. She's assessing whether you can meet her at the level of honesty and emotional awareness she expects. Men who misread these cues often misinterpret intelligence and intuition for mystery or distance. But the truth is far more revealing. Notice her energy around freedom and choice. Women who have explored multiple partners understand autonomy intimately. She values independence, knows her boundaries, and respects her own space. A man who tries to control, rush, or manipulate her rarely succeeds. That isn't coldness, it's wisdom born from experience. She has learned the cost of compromise without clarity, and she won't repeat it. Then there's her approach to intimacy beyond the physical. Experience teaches women to seek emotional resonance, trust, and mutual respect. She may have explored bodies, but she values hearts, minds, and integrity above all. The way she prioritizes emotional connection over superficial attention is one of the strongest signs of her past, lessons learned and applied with precision. Finally, notice her comfort with self. Women who have been with many men exude a quiet, unshakable confidence. It's in how she laughs, how she carries herself, how she navigates life without seeking permission. That strength is magnetic, and it's impossible to fake. Men who see it clearly understand that they're engaging with someone who knows herself completely, and that realization changes everything about how you relate, communicate, and connect. Here's the final reflection for you. Think about her energy, her boundaries, her confidence, and her subtle cues. Now ask yourself this equation: awareness plus observation plus respect equals connection. How well can you solve it in your own life? Drop your answer in the comments below. If this insight helped you, like the video, subscribe for more, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this truth.